Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. Common and costly errors taxpayers should avoid when preparing a tax return. COVID Tax Tip 2020-17, February 10th, 2021. Electronically filing a tax return reduces errors because the tax software does the math, flags common errors, and prompts taxpayers for missing information. So they're basically saying even if your tax return is going to be fairly basic, and especially if it's going to be more complex, you pretty much typically want to be using the tax software because unlike doing it by hand, the tax software will do some of the math for you. It'll help you with an interview process depending on the type of software that you're going to be using. And it often will have prompts that will help you to flag problems or errors with the data input. Whereas if you do the thing by hand and you try to fill out the actual tax returns with the actual forms, you can do that, but you're way more likely to make those types of errors such as math errors and whatnot and not have the prompts to help you. Note once again that there is the free software for many individuals that you can find or go to, or at least start the search from the IRS website, go into the free file information, and then you can go to the software and you might have access to software depending on your circumstances, depending on the complexity of your return, for free. So it can also help taxpayers claim valuable credits and deductions. Using a reputable tax preparer, there's a link to reputable preparer here, including certified public accountant, enrolled agents, there's a link to enrolled agents, or other knowledgeable tax professionals can also help avoid errors. So obviously your second check, and the way I would think about this is if you have a fairly basic return, then you might be able to get access to the free file software, which would help you to go through the interview process, which may then be sufficient as a double check in and of itself, having the software to help you to walk through the returns, given the fact that your return is not too complex and you don't have a whole lot of planning needs into the future at that point in time. If your return is more complex to the point where you don't have access to the free software, possibly because your adjusted gross income is higher, possibly because you have like a Schedule C sole proprietor business or something like that that complicates your return, possibly because you have itemized deductions, then you might want to purchase proprietary software, actually purchase the software to help you with the tax preparation needs, and or at that point, some point, you might then want to hire a professional, a tax professional, and the tax professional would not only be there then just to meet the immediate need of the tax preparation at that point, because your taxes are to the point of complexity that you're going to need help with the tax preparation possibly, but also with planning into the future. What am I doing in the future? What are my other related kind of needs, possibly bookkeeping needs if I have my accounting like a business, a Schedule C sole proprietorship, and so on. And if there are any tax problems, if the IRS comes back in the future, it would be nice if you had someone that could help you out to be talking to the IRS at that point in time as well. So the IRS urges all taxpayers to file electronically and choose direct deposit to get their refund faster and avoid pandemic-related paper delays. So obviously, if you're looking for a refund, then the easiest and fastest way to get it is to electronically file and do the direct deposit information so they can get you the refund as fast as possible. IRS has been pushing for the electronic filing for some time. The pandemic has increased that push. If you file by paper, it might take longer to process, and if you owe money, you might not care, right? If you owe money and you want a paper file, maybe it takes longer to process, maybe it takes them longer to cash the check that you hand wrote and send them. Maybe you don't care as long as you're not getting charged penalties and interest in that case. However, even in that case, it might be nice to e-file so that you know that they at least got the return, it's being processed, and so on and so forth, and the payment has been received so that you can avoid penalties and interest. So IRS Free File offers online tax preparation, direct deposit, and refunds and electronic filing all for free. So there's a link to the IRS Free File here. Once again, that's going to be a site that basically helps you select a third-party software that provides free file options. It looks to me like the IRS basically pressured some of the big, tax softwares out there to have a free file offer for people who have incomes under a certain threshold. Although those offers will differ, they're not all the standard offer or they're not all the same. So this link will then take you to those offers, and then you can choose one that will be sufficient for you, and then go to the third-party software and possibly file the software for free. Remember, when you do that, then you want to check. I would check for the brand name of the software, the ones that I recognized most. I would probably go with if I qualify for them, although they probably have more stringent qualifications for the free offer. So if I don't qualify, then you might go to some other offer, and you want to make sure that they got all the things you need, which may include like a state tax return filing. Make sure that you can do any state needs if you need to do a state tax return as well. And if you need an earned income tax credit, make sure you're picking up software that has the capability to do that in the free options. So some options available in Spanish. They also have some offers available in Spanish as well, which is nice. Here are some common errors taxpayers should avoid when preparing tax return. Missing an inaccurate Social Security number. So if the Social Security is not there or it's not accurate, that's not good, because the IRS doesn't see you as a person. They see you as a number. And if you don't have the number, they don't know who you are. So you got to make sure that's right. So each SSN Social Security number on a tax return should appear exactly as printed on the Social Security card. Now note, if you're e-filing, there might be kind of a double check with this, because usually if you have the wrong Social Security number, it may not process. You may not be able to process the return. It may say, hey, your Social Security number is wrong. But also note that if you're using tax software, you want to make sure you get the identity number correct, because if they do charge you, they may charge you by Social Security number, and if you have to change it, then you might, they might try to charge you twice or something like that. So misspelled names. Likewise, a name listed on the tax return should match the name on the person's Social Security card. So where they're going to be tying out who you are, Social Security card tied out to the name. So you got to have those two things tied out so that the Social Security number should match what the name should be exactly. Any misspellings, any nicknames, or anything like that, once again, may result in the software or the IRS kicking back the return, meaning if you electronically file it and those things do not match, it might not be processed correctly. So incorrect filing status. Some taxpayers choose the wrong status. The interactive tax assistant on irs.gov can help taxpayers choose the correct status, especially if more than one filing status applies. Tax software also helps prevent mistakes with filing status. So the filing statuses are things like the single, head of household, married filing separate, and so on. But those are going to kind of be the main three. And you want to make sure it goes in this order in terms of tax benefits. Usually it means single's the worst, right? If you could qualify for head of household, which usually means you got some type of dependent, then that's one of the requirements. So if you got some type of dependent and you're single, you might say, do I qualify for the head of household? And check that out. And then married filing joint is usually better, although they try to make it kind of like it's two single returns that are combined together. So you would think the tax outcomes, meaning the progressive tax system, would give you a benefit similar to kind of like two single filers that are combined together, now married filing joint. So you want to make sure you're picking up, you don't want to file single if you can qualify for like head of household, for example, or anything like that. So math mistakes. Math errors are some of the most common mistakes. They range from simple addition and subtraction to more complex calculations. Taxpayers should always double check their math. Better yet, tax prep software does it automatically. So if you do the tax return by hand, like the fillable forms, or you try to print out the forms, then you actually have to do a lot of tedious math, meaning you got to put the thing in one box, and then the directions say, now add box here, box 3, and box 8, or something like that. You got to add them all together. So what you want to do is have the concept down in theory of what's going on, and then hopefully you can use the software to basically help you out with the math, where you're much less likely to have just a simple math error or just pick up the wrong line in some long form that you're kind of working through. So again, if you're below a certain threshold and you have access to that free file software, that's probably better than doing it by hand. If you like to do it by hand, if you think it's more transparent, you probably want to do it by hand and use the software, right? If you want to double check it, if you just like to understand it, you want to do it by hand, I would do it by hand, fill out your forms, do it in the software, and then line them up side by side so that you both understand it and have that double check of the software kind of helping you out. So figuring credits or deductions. Taxpayers can make mistakes figuring things like their earned income tax credit, child and dependent care credit, and recovery rebate credit. So these are some of the big credits, especially for lower income individuals. Their earned income tax credit, or these could be refundable type of credits. And because they're refundable type of credits, meaning you could get money back even if your tax liability goes to zero, that they're actually quite complex. I do have a video on the earned income tax credit if you want to take a look at it. It's probably the most complex credit there is out there, because it varies and goes up and down on weird types of things. As your income goes up, the credit goes up, which is weird until to a certain point, and then it goes back down. And it makes sense. I mean, the incentives make sense because they're trying to incentivize or not take away benefits for people to work, right? You don't want to just have people not be benefiting as they work more. So that's kind of the objective. But anyway, it's complex because of that. And the child and dependent care credit can be somewhat complex. Obviously, the recovery rebate credit is totally new this year because it's tied to the economic impact payment. So if you had any problems with round 1 or round 2 of the economic impact payment, then the remedy to that is the recovery rebate credit, the economic impact payments being, in essence, a prepayment of the recovery rebate credit. So the software, once again, helps with that to get that right. If someone is eligible for a recovery rebate credit and either didn't receive an economic impact payment or receive less than the full amounts, they must file a 2020 tax return to claim the credit, even if they don't usually file. So if you know anyone or if you yourself do not usually file, you don't need to file, but you didn't get the economic impact payment, possibly because you don't file and the IRS, didn't have the information, then the only way to do that is to file. So there's probably going to be a lot more people that file in 2020, but it should be a fairly basic return. And once again, you should be able to kind of do it for free. So it's burdensome to do it because you got to do this thing that you haven't really done. You got to figure out the tax return and whatnot, but you should have access possibly to the free software to help to get that done. So you might want to check into that and let people know about that if there's a situation for them. So the Interactive Tax Assistant, there's a link to that here, can help determine if a taxpayer is eligible for tax credits or deductions. Tax software will calculate these credits and deductions and include any required forms and schedules. Incorrect bank account numbers. Taxpayers who are due a refund should choose direct deposit. So that means they're going to put it directly into your bank account. That's the fastest way to go. This is the fastest way for taxpayers to get their money. However, taxpayers need to make sure they use the correct routing and account numbers on their tax return. So obviously, if you got the wrong bank account number, a routing number, bank number, then that'll be a problem for the direct deposit. So unsigned forms, an unsigned tax return isn't valid. In most cases, both spouses must sign a joint return. Exceptions may apply for members of the armed forces or other taxpayers who received a valid power of attorney. So when you have a married filing joint return, you have two people that need to verify the tax return. So you got to have both signatures unless there's some unusual circumstance, such as someone's, at war for us. And if that's the case, thanks for your service. And, or if there's like a power of attorney because the person is, incapable or for whatever reason to do the signing. So taxpayers can avoid this error by filing their returns electronically and digitally signing it before sending it to the IRS. So if you do the electronic filing, then your signature is basically electronic, and that might be easier in some cases. So filing with an expired individual tax identification number. If a taxpayer's ITIN, I-T-I-N, is expired, they should go ahead and file using the expired number. The IRS will process that return and treat it as a return filed on time. However, so if you have an expired ITIN, then you basically still want to file, because if you don't file, then the IRS is going to, obviously charge penalties and interest. So the IRS will still treat it as being filed on time, so they don't charge penalties and interest. But then, of course, you want to update the ITIN. So, however, the IRS won't allow any exemptions or credits to a return filed with the expired ITIN. So, and I think the reasoning on this would be, hey, look, we're not, the ITIN is expired, therefore this individual, we're not sure if they're legal or whatnot, but we don't want to penalize if they file the return. So they don't charge penalties and interest on it, considering it's filed on time, but they're not going to allow the exemptions or credits, which could result in like recovery rebate credits or refunds and so on to people who don't have a valid ITIN. So taxpayers will receive a notice telling the taxpayers to renew their number. So there's a link to the renew number here. Once the taxpayer renews the ITIN, the IRS will process the return normally.